Welcome back. You're watching Sokoni here on Morning Prime. I'm holding court with Professor Gituro Wadaina, who is a professor at the School of Business, University of Nairobi. We have Bunyasi Sako with us, who's an economist and also a politician. We have politician Bill Okero, and he's a businessman as well. We're holding court as well with Professor Exen Iraki, who is a professor at University of Nairobi School of Business. We want to turn our focus also on now the biggest headache for Kenyans, that if a proposal will go through from Kenya Power of raising the electricity tariffs by 78%, that is bound to adversely affect your business and affect also your daily lives as well, because everything also largely depends on the cost of power. This is coming closely on an effort by the government, which had created a task force to try and look at this problem that we have with the high cost of energy in the country. They came up, the John Gumi report, came up with a raft of issues, looking also some of the contractual agreement that, you know, the power sector have had over the years in the independent power contractors as well. But what is really informing the cost of power going up by 78%? We thought it was 15%, but now 78%, that is just way off, of course, the pockets of many Kenyans. And this is where I want to put it on the table of our panelists this morning to discuss this issue of Kenya Power, the cost of energy. It seems that we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop here in this country as far as the cost of energy is concerned. Manufacturing sector will be adversely affected by this. And I think we need to have a conversation as a country with ourselves.
I thought you had something, Mheshimiwa, was to talk about Joe.
No, about?
Magoha, or you come to it?
Yes.
Is Magoha not working?
Yeah. Okay. No, it is working. So I wanted just to continue with Bill Okero on that particular bit. You just give your commiseration for Magoha, and you go to the cost of power.
Thank you very much. First, I think I want to express my condolences to the family of Professor Magoha. I've not known him personally, but I think the few years that I've seen him running that Ministry of Education, I was impressed. I mean, he was a no-nonsense guy. He managed to turn around the ministry in terms of the exams, in terms of the rolling out the CBC. I think he is really, he was a professional, not just an academic. He was a professional, and he knew what he was doing. So we sympathize with the family. This is the second vote I'm holding in the last few weeks.
Let me sort out your mic. Again, I think it's not really working. Don't get frustrated with that. It's sabotage. This is the cost of going to Mombasa Road. They sabotage that, but every time...
He says he's in a good mood today.
All right. Let's hear from Bunyasi Sako. I think we'll give that opportunity to Bill Okero much later. But this issue,
the power
issue.
Yeah, I think, first of all, expensive power is an expensive luxury for our economy. Most times when companies complain about Kenya, among other things, is cost of power. Mm-hmm. Households, on the one hand, there are people who have been waiting to be connected for years and years, they don't get it.
Yeah.
On the other, you get it, it's barely on, and then you are paying huge tariffs. I think something needs to be cleaned out. There was time when the Parliament made a bit of noise about this to simplify the tariffication around power. So we're able to see they should measure themselves against the market. Mm. You can't decide what profit you want to make, for example, or surplus, however you define it, because I don't know if it's a parastatal or a profit-making institution. And then you simply change pricing, you have a monopoly, do what you want. Secondly, one of the big challenges we've got are these IPPs.
Yes.
In a motion we discussed in Parliament one time, my recollection may be very detailed, but it was something like, if you start off with the cost of power per kilowatt hour by KPLC, which was about, I don't know, 6 US cents or something around there, and then the IPPs went as high as 66 US cents. Mm-hmm. the negotiated rates were, over the years, they were going up. And somehow this has to be covered somewhere, in this mess. I think that there are a lot of governance issues in there. The debate was frustrated for various reasons, but part of it was that I think maybe it was, stepping on people's toes too much. But we are a committee that should not carry that kind of thing. Some of them have been added on without any real justification why we need it, and so on. But we're not even worrying about who owns the capital. I think that we really must clean up so that we get clear open pricing, market-related determinations. So there are limitations what you can do. If you can't pay your way, you have to borrow your way. If you can't do either of those, you're going to exit the market. Or it should, split up to do different things. I know they did some splitting up, between generation, distribution, and what's the other item in it. But I think those reforms should have been deepened, and we should have allowed competitiveness along the entire chain. We can't. What we have got now is really, in my view, is just meeting money for some people who earn dividends from KPLC.
So and Ketraco, is that?
That was part of the reform. Yes,
Ketraco,
yes.
Ketraco and the GDC Geothermal Development Corporation.
Generation and so on.
Yeah, is back, so you can continue from where you had began also with just commiserating.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. My condolences to the family of Professor Magoha. The family is really, we're all saddened as a country because they lost two, in a very short time. So our condolences to the family. He was a very, very good professional. He's of course made his mark in the Ministry of Education. The short time that he was there, particularly rolling out the new curriculum of CBC. So our condolences to the family of the late Professor Magoha. Now, on this Kenya Power tariffs, I think Kenya Power is now engaged in the level of economic saboteur, frankly. If there's anything that will affect the economy, it is power, because it underpins everything, not just manufacturing, but the entire cost of living, because everyone uses power. And this is an institution that has enjoyed government protection for a very long time, including cash, bailout when we think that the situation has not been good, like last year. They got over 7 billion shillings from the government. And continuously we're giving them benefits. For example, for the heavy fuel oil that they use in the independent power, we give them the fuel cost charge, the inflation adjustments, foreign exchange adjustments, and everything to try and protect this institution in every way possible. But again, it's still the most expensive. If you look at the comparative power charges in Kenya and other countries in sub-Saharan Africa, we are the highest, all the way from Ghana to South Africa, to Egypt, we are the highest. And it's one of the reasons why our cost of production, we have lost competitiveness in our industries. It's mainly because of the cost of production. Many people got discouraged even starting a business that involves the use of power because of the expense of power. So we started these changes a very long time ago. But for me, I think there is massive corruption in this industry, fueled by the political elite. And I think there is no commitment, there is no political will to try and address the problem of Kenya Power. 2 years ago, the president set up a task force.
Yes.
They came up specifically with recommendations to deal with the independent power producers, because those thermal powers is the most expensive element in Kenya Power, generation power costs, and we don't need it. You have the cheapest and cleanest source of power in this country, and the geothermal, the cheapest and the cleanest in terms of the emissions. Yet, if you look at the mix, we use more of the IPPs because they belong to the political elite, and there's no will. If the government is really committed to engaging, to having competitiveness in terms of reducing the cost of production, in terms of, we need to address this matter. We need to shut down all those power producers and allow this company to use the cheapest source of power, and stop all this nonsense about power tariffs every other year. This is my take on it.
All right. Could you also latch on, let's say from, before I ask that question from Iraqi, let's say from you.
Yes, this is an interesting debate because since I started coming to this studio, it's probably the fourth or fifth time we have discussed the issue of Kenya Power. But let me start with some good news. After 59 years, power finally came to my village.
Oh, congratulations.
And I'm not going to disclose the name of my village for security reasons. But I can give you a hint. It's exactly 160 kilometers from Nairobi.
And it has taken how many years?
Somewhere around
59 years. 59 years.
So sad.
But when I talk to
Is it a project of the last mile?
I don't know.
It was a last mile project.
I don't know what it was. But I can also remind you there's no tarmac. So I hope I not wait for another 59 years. But I think the big issue I have with power is simple. When I look on the media and travel around this country, there's a lot of power being produced from the wind, from hydro, from geothermal, a lot of power. So from an economic point of view, the price of power should be going down because the demand is going up.
Yeah.
But Kenya is unusual because you have more power being produced, but the price is going up, should be going down. So the power sector in Kenya seems to defy economic laws. And that's why my colleague is saying there's something unusual about that, because why are you paying so much for power? Yes, there's so much power. So that might be something administrative. It must be something about the way power is generated, transmitted, and commercialized. And it's simply because there's no competition. Anytime you have a monopoly, whether it's a political party, whether it's a power producer, there will always be inefficiencies. So one of the things we should be thinking about is how do we give Kenya Power some competition? In other parts of the world, very few, nobody said you must have monopoly in power transmission, generation, and commercialization. Because if you look at it this way, there is a lot of competition in production. You can have geothermal, you can have wind, you can have many others, even solar. When you come to transmission, there's monopoly. When you come to commercialization, there's monopoly. So inject some competition, and I can assure you there will be more efficiencies. And finally, if you have expensive power, nobody is going to invest in your country. If you cannot think about the most basic thing, which is power, people start thinking about other things. If I can't get power cheaply, what about other services? So I think it's a good case for the government, for the individuals, to make sure that power is affordable in this country. And finally, there's something as simple as information. Because if we have power, we can watch TV, we can get the internet. So we become more enlightened, and we become more creative, and probably more innovative.
Maybe you don't want you to.
So when you deny people power, you deny them a very important ingredient, which is information.
And the quality has deteriorated.
The quality of life.
We have blackouts every other day, whether it's in industries, in the factories, at homes. Terrible service.
There's something Iraqi brought, perhaps interesting. I have an idea where he comes from. And one thing, he related two things he's bringing, power and infrastructure. It's sad because he comes from a very productive area. So there are two ingredients we are missing for that. Agriculture is very, very productive. And there's another thing he brought that we need to address. Why are you doing subsidy to a monopolist? Really? How? Diba. You say here a monopolist, take. And yesterday, Maive and I, we had a very interesting discussion. I asked her, have you become a Kenya Power person? Because he was there reading the meter. And he says, this guy don't bother to read. So they wait, and all of a sudden there's no power. A lot of inefficiency. But and you look countries like Ethiopia. I was discussing with a friend of mine called Taya. He's doing his PhD in University Pools on Tuesday. And look at the investment Ethiopia is doing because of the need for power. It realizes one of the key ingredients for any country to create wealth is to have power, and cheap power. There are four things I see in Kenya Power, which add up, summarized by exactly what Iraqi and Bill has pointed out, governance issues. Remember the whole idea of the tokens? Yeah? The meters and the tokens. We were like cheated during the day. The second thing which came, and John, I lead the PT, John was very clear. IPPs, independent power producers, the servos of this town. And it's like a ghost kind of this, who owns this thing. Let's get it there. As the deputy president keeps saying, this is state capture. If state capture, let's see, is the deep state. Let's see if it's the deep state. And shame them up. Mm-hmm. The third thing is, and we have gone over years, this was issues with the transformers, who are getting prices you could not understand very well. Mm-hmm. And finally was the whole saga about the electric posts. Move to this, move to that. When you look at all those, they can be summarized with one thing: the issues of governance. And it's time to take the whip. It's a time to say, no, we cannot tolerate this nonsense. Because sabotage, as Bill is putting it.
Mm-hmm. It's an economic sabotage.
If I'm going to establish a manufacturing farm, and manufacturing has always, and it's interesting, he gave me some numbers about manufacturing in this country. From 1956 to when we got independent, it was performing well. From 1964, we have never met target like people like Bangladesh, Ethiopia. And all the issue is, my mind goes to fellows who have had responsibility in that of. Some of them have been taken to court, what it is the other day. I don't know who. So I think that's a point where the government of the day says, we can't move this nonsense. Let's sort it out and once for all.
Right. Below, we have Professor Iraqi also talking about competition. And alternative energy is solar energy. But we can see also from the regulator, especially when we are talking about EPRA, that in the latest set of regulations they published, they want the power distributor to have the sole task of determining which companies and individuals will supply the excess solar energy to the national grid. And of course, this will allow households and companies to enter into a 10-year contract with Kenya Power to supply the power at prices determined by the distributor company. And the new development also already is causing disquiet in some quarters, who argue that the power company will have an unfair advantage in determining supply prices, a move that could see their solar energy undervalued. The new agreement also targets households producing solar energy but lack the means to store the excess power they produce, opening window into a partnership with the power distributor. And we know it is still playing catch-up in the solar energy. And we saw also recently from one of the dailies that if now you're putting up your structure, your house right now, it is a requirement by Kenya Power for you to have a solar panel on top or patched or atop your roof.
By Kenya Power?
By Kenya Power. That is a regulation that now. So are they also encroaching in that particular area where we want to uncouple ourselves from monopoly? You want to go the alternative way so that you can use solar energy, but still they're bearing down your neck. It's still Kenya Power with their monopoly, tenterhooks.
When we created KenGen, the objective at the time was to enhance the efficiency of Kenya Power, remove the power generation, let them focus on distribution. Then we came up with a regulator to determine the pricing. Again, the reason was to try and cushion Kenyans against the monopoly by Kenya Power, so that the regulator is the one who independently determines the costing. Then we went to the KETRACO and we said, distribution is again huge business. Let the transmission be done again by another company. Then we went all these things have been done to try and make the cost of power cheap over the last 2, 3, 4 decades. But I think clearly, in my view, maybe, I don't know whether we went wrong when we privatized and some people took interest in the company, and now we're, being held hostage by vested interests in this industry. But clearly what is happening, even with regards to this solar you have mentioned, is an attempt to try and bypass the role of the regulator, because the regulator is the one to determine the costing, even if it is green energy, if it is solar, whatever. That responsibility Kenya Power should not have a role in that.
It should be EPRA.
Absolutely, yes. Why should Kenya Power determine who puts what on their roof and and the supply, anything to do with supplying or generating energy and supplying it to the national grid, that determination of the costing and the pricing is the mandate legally of EPRA. And so any other attempt is to try and give Kenya Power an unfair advantage, and as they've done in everything else, because it's so insulated, it's so protected, that there's nothing like that institution in this country, you know, in every aspect.
Okay, let's hear from Bunyasi Sapo.
I think very problematic. I have an anecdote from Nambale, a live example, I must say, where we had a Spanish NGO that provides solar energy, distributes solar energy within the village, in villages where it operates. And they needed the permission to expand the network. And what KPLC did, then there is some archaic law about how minimum distance you can set up your own alternative power supply. So what they did is they suddenly began to drop posts, dig up holes, as if they're bringing lines, and in a way that they encircled the areas where these were going to be located. This NGO was going to locate, and this NGO was unable, therefore, to go ahead and build the expansion. They had equipment on the high seas, the huge storage facilities for solar, the battery storage thing. They couldn't clear them in Mombasa because now there's nowhere they're going to put it. And all that Kenya Power is doing is frustrating them out of town. Now, to hear that they want now that a solar unit to be put in buildings, they are trying to get into the act of others in order to expand their monopoly. I think there are global lessons we can learn from, including competition in the supply of power, where power producers can use the main grid at some agreed rental cost, whatever the charges might be. They don't have to build their own supply lines and so on. And when you want power in your, let's take a home domestic use, but could be a factory use, you decide which supplier you're going to use, either because their tariffs are more competitive, they're more responsive when there is a breakdown, or any other aspects you may decide to do. So I think we must consider going that direction, so that the power monopoly is sort of reduced. And it's surprising. This is a government-owned facility, and reforming it has proven very problematic because of vested interests into it, very vested interests. Even when we thought we're now liberalizing by expanding generation to independent power producers, the rates that they negotiated have ended up being scandalous, actually, to a point where we were unable at one time to have an open debate on what was happening, because now suddenly ownership of these structures had something that was positively correlated with the power structures. Power is in governance structures and so on. We like to mask these things, but what we are saying, and I think my colleagues have mentioned the issue of governance, corruption, sabotage, and so on. I think we must face it squarely, because it's debilitating in its charges and rates.
Right, Iraqi, let's just hear from you as well.
When I look at about last year, I talked to somebody from, I think from the US, from Australia, and from a few other countries. I told them to share with me their power bills. They don't look like Kenya power bills, because I didn't see anything like forex exchange. I didn't see anything like inflation adjustment, fuel cost. So why is Kenya power so protected? My salary is not protected from exchange rate, it's not protected from inflation, it's not protected from power cost. So when I pay a matatu, for example, the matatu guy does not ask me to pay for fuel. He does not ask me to pay for inflation. So why is Kenya Power so protected, unlike other businesses? So clearly there are good reasons why power is very expensive in this country. I mean to remove all those things, so that we have a level playground.
There are good reasons.
There are very good reasons why we need to remove all those charges that are on Kenya Power bills. As we said earlier, if power is expensive, so many things become expensive. And I am very surprised that somebody is talking of increasing power by 78% when everybody is talking about the costs of goods and services in this country. One is drought, when there are so many other inflationary pressures in this country. And we should not be looking at the money that Kenya Power makes, we should also looking at the cost. Because if you want to make money, there are two ways to do it. You raise the price or reduce the cost. So why are we not focusing on reducing the cost that Kenya Power incurs in providing us with power? If we did not do all those efficiencies, I'm very sure the cost of power would go down without any increase in tariffs. Why are you not focusing on that? Why not focusing on the cost of distribution, the cost of commercializing, the cost of reading meters, the cost of all that? So let's focus on the cost.
We still, of course, when we look back to Ketraco, some of also agreement they entered with Italian farms. Remember on the distribution and the Turkana county. Still, we are in court, I think, paying some huge billions because of none of the contractual agreements being fulfilled regarding that particular distribution in Turkana. I don't know if you may remember that. You can shed light on that. And why also this is contributing to the cost of energy.
You know, Dibal, first you must know that Ministry of Energy, most of these organized institutions under this ministry are cash cows for the government. Cash cows. Whether it's, all of them are institutions that have been used to inflate procurement process completely. Kenya Power, for example, 5 of the top materials that they use, I can tell you this for a fact, and on national TV, it's normally reserved for the top political class in this country. When you talk of transformers, when you talk of the meters, when you talk of the cables, the conductors, the posts, these are things which are supplied, and that is where 90% of their cost goes. And everyone knows. That's why under the previous administration, they had a whole ministry to try and talk over, and they sent home everyone, and still nothing has been resolved. So it's the same thing you saw in Ketraco when that Marsabit wind thing, you remember?
Yes.
That wrong payment that was made. And attempts were being made to refund that money. And people in government were saying, no, the money should not be refunded. You saw it all laid out.
Yes. That's what I'm talking about.
I mean, and no action is ever being taken on this. So, and if your energy costs in the world today, the major concern among any developed country, any industrial country, is about the cost of energy. If you cannot get your energy costs right, when this, you can never go anywhere. When this government of Jubilee came in 2013, they said we would have increased our power generation to 5,000 megawatts. You remember that? And most of it was from geothermal.
Yep.
And they undertook, the current president was the deputy president, they undertook to reduce the cost of power by 30%. In the 10 years, it has only gone up by more than 30%. And now we want to increase it by another 70%. And a few years ago, they reached a point where they said, we don't even have capacity, we don't have demand for the power that we produce.
Yes.
The next day you hear we're importing again from Ethiopia, we're importing from Uganda. This is one of the most important cash cows in the government, let me tell you. Everything to do with the generation, the transmission, the supply. So unless really the government is committed to addressing this, we will never have a situation where we can be competitive in the region in terms of our productivity in every aspect. And I think this is something that the government needs to look at critically.
I'm just looking at, when you're talking about this alternative source of energy, we have all these solar, 10 largest solar projects in Kenya. One being led there on top by the Garissa Solar Project, which was supposed to be at least putting out 55 megawatts. The Garissa solar plant, which is currently the biggest of the solar projects in Kenya and East Africa, is $138 million utility scale solar photovoltaic farm located in the town of Garissa. And this was the project of the rural area rectification, the RARE, and he was expected to sell it to Kenya Power at a cost of at least $0.12 per kilowatts US. We have Malindi, 52 megawatts, selling also to Kenya Power. They've not indicated here at what rate. We have Alton Keses, one that is 51.5 megawatts, The plant is owned by Spanish independent power producer Alten Energies Renewables through its subsidiary Alten Africa. The contractor for the engineering, procurement and construction is French firm Voltalier. Its construction started in December 2018 and is by date third of the largest solar projects in Kenya. The electricity from the plant will be sold to Kenya Power at 0.1.2 per kilowatt. We have Kopere, 50 megawatts, and the grid is generated from the farm. Let me just read. Kopere solar plant is $64 million utility scale solar photovoltaic farm located, of course, in the town of Kopere, Nani County. The solar farm sits on 158 acres. This is supposed to be, of course, generating for Kenya Power or selling to Kenya Power at 0.08 per kilowatt US dollars. We have also 48, that is El Dosol. There are many of them, 0.12 per kilowatts US dollar. We have Radiant, we have Rumuruti, that is also the same amount, 0.08. We have Nakuru, that has not been indicated at how much. I was just wanting to look at that particular figure and the tabulation we have also in the Standard today, looking at those figures as well, comparing what also this is Kenya Power is selling, or Kenya Power is buying from this particular solar farms as well. Are they justified? Do you find it's a wide margin? Looking at the proposed shilling per kilowatt as well, 14.21, that is for the domestic line. We have domestic ordinary, 21.68, small commercials, 14, small commercials 2, 21.08, e-mobility, of course, everyone is going to the e-mobility right now. This will be a big arena if you want to also go the green way and have the e-vehicles. We have commercial industrials metered at 450 volts there, and commercial industrial 5 metered at 132 kilo volts, and the figures are tabulated there. What would you say?
It's interesting because this week residents in Cape Town and manufacturers and companies, they're actually demonstrating.
Because of the power crisis there.
The power crisis. Mm-hmm. Pakistan the other day went to a whole total blackout. What perhaps we need to move forward is, I think Tim and Exxon is right. We'll sit here and talk. Just implement the reports which are there. John came very clear what needs to be done. It's like, as King Getich, Julius would say, you just come here talk, we're just like playing a guitar to a goat. That's what we're doing. I'm telling you, the bar team here, people know exactly what's happening there. But there are benefits, as Bill has pointed out. Who is going to supply these things? And God forbid we don't reach somewhere we are actually saying we are not going to pay 78%. Because you reach somewhere and say it's not affordable, I can't. One of the key ingredients in terms of manufacturing takes so much of whatever we are making. So just forget it. And I move to the opportunities. And this meeting they have in Dakar, they came very clearly. You can do any business part in Africa. Let's harmonize how we deal with it. And the power was one of the things which came out. So if I want to start a manufacturing, maybe whatever it could be, apparels and textile, I'll go to neighboring country, Uganda or Ethiopia, and watch the space. Because as a manufacturer, and this is basic economics, we call it economics 1000, I have opportunity to move around. And when I produce, I move there. And what you're saying is, the spiral effect is people become poorer and poorer. Eventually, we say we can't take it more.
All right.
Yes.
Iraqi.
I think the issue here is very simple. Mm-hmm. We have power on one hand, we have the market for power on one hand. And people, the question we are asking is, what power should get to the market. And it seems you get your power to the market, not because it is the most efficient, but because of your network. Mm-hmm. Are you able to access the people who control the power market? And all you're saying, why don't we make the power market efficient? Let there be competition. So that if I produce my solar power and I take it to the market, somebody should be able to buy it because it's cheaper, not because I'm known. Mm-hmm. So all those data you are giving us shows clearly that solar power is very cheap. But is it getting to the consumers? So if we make the system more efficient, there's no reason why power should not come down. Mm-hmm. I have a photo somebody sent me taken in 1934, somewhere near Nyahururu, by a certain Mozongo. And I saw a certain propeller on top of her roof. And I was asking her, what is that propeller doing? She was telling me in 1934, I was using that propeller to charge my battery. I was using the wind to charge my battery. So almost 100 years ago, people are trying with wind. We have a lot of wind in this country. Why can't we get power from it? We have a lot of solar in this country. Why can't we get power from it? So we have
I'm asking, these solar farms and the big projects that we have in the northern part of the country, a huge expansion of a solar farm. How is it contributing to the grid? I think they need to also come clear on some of these efforts and how they're contributing to the grid at the end of the day, so that we see this as some of the kilowatts that are coming from the solar farms. And this all that we put tabulated here, together with the largest, I think, solar farm we have.
You're being academic, in my view, I'm sorry. Why would I allow it to come and I'm benefiting from there?
So we need transparency. Let Iraqi finish. Sorry for interrupting you.
This is what I'm saying. Why do we make energy so mysterious? If you go to the market, you know how much maize goes, how much beans go. We even know how much dowry costs. So why do we make pricing why do we make pricing of energy so mysterious? So we should be able to see somewhere in public how much solar is going, how much hydro is going, how much is going. So that when I'm the customer, I should be able to decide, I want to buy solar, I want to buy this. But the problem is, you have to go through somebody to get that power. Mm-hmm. So one of the things we can do is, why can't we have energy devolved? So that if I am in Tok, and somebody can generate power there, let me get power from there. If I'm in Mombasa and somebody can generate power from there, let me get power from there. I don't get power from where from the grid.
The national distributor.
Yes, so once we bring that competition, power will go down. And the problem we have been discussing for the last 1 year or even more is the question of monopoly. And the monopoly has never been efficient anywhere in the country. So what we will be discussing here is how do we dismantle the monopolies in either distribution, in generation, transmission, or commercialization.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know, I just to add, gentlemen, the government owns 51% of the shares in this company, right? And 49% is privatized. If this institution is not going to be managed properly, it's going to collapse. You've seen what happened in South Africa. Soon, we will have no power. Already, many of us in the industry, manufacturing, get power not more than 4 or 5 days in a week. The other 2 days, there's no power. Every day you open it, there are pages and pages of power outages. In homes, it's the same. So the thing is, you've seen the cost for energy like solar is about 14 cents or 15 cents.
Yes.
You come to Kengen for geothermal, it's half of that. Then you go to the independent power, the thermal power, it's 3 times that amount. 3 times. And what has been happening is that Kenya Power has, because of that expediency, for the political expediency or whatever, they have been taking between 25 to 30% of their power from the thermal power, even when it's not absolutely necessary. This is because people have invested that thing. Government has given guarantee for many, many, many years to come. They've got into a situation where if you try to cancel those contracts, we'll be paying for the rest of our life. This is why that task force was set up. But none of the recommendations by that task force has been implemented to date. The government knows what are the issues. And in fact, the task force did indicate how the government can renegotiate and get out of these things. But there's no political will because most of those things belong to people who are connected, to those who are in power. That's the reality. So we are talking of economy, we are talking of competitiveness, we are doing things, but we know at the end of the day this country is not going to go anywhere because of the challenges that we face in this sector, which is critical.
So this is a Gordian knot we cannot cut. That's what you want to say, because we have oligarchs who are actually now also taking the Kenya Power at ransom right now. As a country, we have to pay heavily because they are vested interest. But
I think also some capture.
The state capture.
I think, yes, that's a good point. I just going to say it's one of the things that needs a major shake-up in this economy. It's just that power is very important, and power affects very many other things. But generally, there are many areas in our economy that need a shake-up. Now, in respect of this wind power, for example, one of the items in the contract with the wind power company and the rest of the power system was that suppose we get our farm ready to produce, so we're ready to sell, but you don't have the distribution. You can't pick it up. What would happen? Would incur losses. So they put in a clause to say, no, they'll be deemed to have. No, they will be paid for deemed power. Yeah. That means that you, the producer, say we are ready to supply X kilowatt hours equivalent in such a period, and we were able to do so, last month, last week, whatever period, and we have not been, we couldn't, because you don't have any line to pick up. They pay you for that. Now you can't verify whether in fact they would have delivered, and everything is in the domain of deemed. You really don't price that way. That's one of the problems there is. But in so doing, somewhere along the line, there is a payoff for somebody or other, and I think it's a governance issue now. There are commercial, crooked commercial arrangements, like for the LPPs, but also for this wind power thing. But it's because it benefits people directly, and it's not little money. And this is not totally secret. It will be picked up by state auditors and so on. But who takes the action? I think we really must confront it. We can't pretend there is a mystery. There's no mystery about it. I think it's well known. But who's going to bail the cat?
Who's going to bail the cat? That's the biggest question. And I remember also one time trying to get the Director General of EPRA to come, and even we bought, the, what do you call it, that whiteboard, for him to tabulate, for us to understand. I remember on that, but I don't remember if you were on that particular panel. On the other side of the tracks, yes, and we had even Honorable Ndritu Muridi to try and just explain to us what are this, little bitty of the taxes that are in there that is really adding up to the cost of. It went way over my head. So even for a common mwananchi who cannot really understand, how can they demystify? Is it hidden there so that it seems it's very complicated, but it's very simple at the end of the day? But how do we get ourselves from this morass? Because now we can have all these talking shops,
right? But we are still held captive by the state captures. People who have vested interest in Kenya Power, people who are, of course, supplying. We had a concrete. We had to put all the wooden. The wooden posts that were there so that people can actually put the concrete posts again. Now I can see the concrete posts, now they're being uprooted. We're back to the wood, to the wood posts.
Because they're being produced in some way related to the powers that were.
Right.
And that's the problem.
So we can only hope that what we are hearing in the news about the state capture is real, and somebody is going to do something about it. So it's about political will.
Okay. Should we go with what the Deputy President is suggesting, that they'll have a state capture commission?
There is no likelihood of
so we can try and look at this issue, so that we know the truth.
Just reform.
But how do you reform if then you don't have at least a commission to investigate their recommendation? Even you look at this issue we are talking about, the parastatus. And up to 2013.
Yeah, we'll come to the parastatus. Because this is where I want to.
There are reports. Why just look at those reports? What John said, Gumi, then move them forward.
Because you're talking about privatization of Kenya Power. Could it now we have the government's share 51%, 49%? Is it one? I don't know if it's one of the listed that it should be fully privatized. And if at all, if it will be fully privatized, and what are some of the ramifications that would really come from the privatization of this parastatus at the end of the day? If there's a big issue with the corporate governance as it is right now, how will it be when it is fully privatized? Will we be able to afford the cost of energy, for instance?
Yeah. You know, when we started with the telecom, that was the same question that was asked. That the Telecom Kenya Post and Telecommunications is a strategic company. It's national, vital to the national interest of the nation, and so forth and so forth. Today, if you talk about power, you'll be told, oh, you know, you can't talk about privatizing. You saw it in Kenya Airways. We've pumped, you know, tens of billions of shillings, but we were told, you know, this is strategic. You know, we can't sell it. These things, they have been demystified in the Western countries. You've seen when Margaret Thatcher came in and, you know, they went for liberalization of all those things, okay? British Power and, you know, the telephones and everything. And let me tell you, we have seen this country with the telephone. And the cost, when that thing was started, you remember we used to pay 40, 50 shillings per minute on when Safaricom started. Yes, if you were on the phone that time, it was 40 shillings, 50 shillings per minute. Today, you get it even for less than a shilling. So competitiveness is important. This institution, ideally, under the Monopolies Commission, should also be on the radar. Because if you are running any other sector, any other sector, you're trying to continue, will be on your neck. On this one, it's insulated against everything in law. I think to privatize it would be the right thing to do, because the government has failed to ensure, and the reason why we have this problem is because of that 51% interest of the government. Because of the 51%, and you appoint the MD, you appointed the board, and they will do the bidding of the big guys. And this is where the problem is. That's the factor. We might be talking about the 49% interest by the vested, whatever, but let me tell you, the serious issue is that 51% controlled by government is the main issue. So we can, and we ought to have a second company, a third company, you know, run this thing. Otherwise, we will not, without energy, costs going down, forget about industrializing this country. Forget about being competitive, you know, forget about dealing with the cost of living. Yeah.
All right. Privatization, I think even for the academic, I can see the professors and the lecturers, actually, they're up in arms. They don't want the idea of privatization.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Privatization has worked. He talked about the UK. He talked about US. For example, US privatized all their airlines, deregulated them. They did the same in UK. Some of the companies that are being touted to buy Kenya Airways were actually one time highly regulated or part of the government. But now the airline industry is very vibrant in the US. So if we could privatize telecoms and do very well, why can't we do the same with power? And it is very clear there's a governance issue. If you look at the number of MDs that go through Kenya Power, one person goes, or one day one person is acting, there's always somebody being churned out. So if we could get the private sector.
But telecom has gone full circle right now. We saw now it's fully government owned.
But have you
privatized it?
But we have never.
We had the huge, shareholder.
Totally agreed.
Yeah, can I remember the shareholder? Who funded
Helios and the rest. But we still make our phone call through Safaricom and Airtel. So we need such competition in power sector. So if I cannot go to Kenya Power, I have an alternative. Now I have no alternative.
It's giving people that choice.
So
and I'll make that choice. And if you are being unreasonable, you just close shop. Yeah. Look at if you look at the telecom, look at Airtel, Zain. I don't know how many names it has changed.
Celtel.
And the controller and the regulator has really worked to reduce the cost of telephone. Every time, remember the call termination cost, every time they are pushing them to get the cost down. So even power, when you privatize, the regulator should be doing that.
I want you to show me one place where privatization never worked, so it will not work in Kenya. It has always worked, and competition has always worked. So what is so sacrosanct or mysterious about Kenya Power, or power in this country? Let's privatize it.
And you can go the way of Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, the supply economics. And that's what they did. But there are areas, of course, you can't go that route, like defense.
Of course.
You can't. So Let's get people giving people choices.
But I also...
everything in life is choices.
I'm inclined to wonder why also from the academia you're resisting this privatization. You've been crying foul, there is no money. Even your statutory obligations have not been met for the longest time. And we have unions
talking about the privatization.
There is a union there, reading from the news, they are really against the privatization of the universities.
The universities?
Yes, the universities.
Yes.
Because within the privatization bill, I think also academia is considered to be privatized. Don't you think that's a good way to go?
Yes, but in terms of you need to ring-fence, and this is something we need to ring-fence people from poor families. You can't, if I come from a household where maybe I don't have my parents, and it's poor, those are deliberately, we can ring-fence them.
You can ring-fence through scholarships.
But by and large,
through scholarships that you set aside funds
by and large,
with the PPPs, partnerships with other organizations.
By and large, go that way. I can tell you one university. I found it's a very fantastic model 2 weeks ago. Last week, actually, Wednesday. And it's a Kenyan university, private. They say if Diba is going to get his PhD from that university, one of the supervisors must be from outside the university. They don't know so much in breeding. And you know who they have? They have professors from India, South Africa. Think any part of the world. And they do it that way. There are some public universities. Your first supervisor must be Lucky, the second supervisor must be Wainaina, because they're in that university. But I found that's the model we're talking about. Give people opportunities. I listened to one professor from India. The fellow has a lot of experience and is guiding the student appropriately. I have no problem in terms of making the higher education go that route, but not basic education. Not only must protect them 190, but even the university, and we have cases, I don't know whether Bill you're aware, Adam Mohammed benefited coming from Madeira and all those areas, and you can see how far he has gone now. So there are people from those poor families we have to protect.
Can I get in a bit?
Briefly, yes, we'll take a short break.
The issue of privatizing education and power are two different things. Because in power, I can use charcoal, or I can use a battery, but in education, I don't have that choice. People don't have a lot of choices when it comes to going to school because you must go to school. But for the power, you have a lot of choices. So I think we need to see that difference. That if you deny that kid access to education, he doesn't have another choice. You cannot have education A or B. You cannot talk about either education or no education. But in power, you have a lot of choices. You can either use solar, you can use your batteries, you can even stay in the darkness. We used to do that in the past. So that's why privatization of education and power are two different things. And I think we need a special forum to discuss that education specifically after we have exhausted power.
but within this forum?
Yes, another forum specifically for privatization of education.
Privatization of education.
But is even
I think ultimately, universities have to be privatized, but I think that's in the long term. But I think right now the issue for universities is not about private, it's about merging them. I think the reason why the university education became expensive is the proliferation of universities. In every village and every community wanted its own university. But when the universities were just 3 or 4, you remember, the question of funding was not an issue. Because of the economies of scale. Now you have a university in every little place in this country.
But I think in their own way they are privatized because I have a choice to which public university to go to.
Yeah, but the cost of now running, you lose that economies of scale and the cost of running becomes more expensive. Yeah.
All right. We want to take a short break right now. When we circle back, of course, we want to turn our focus on KRA, who are bound to be stationing on staff in key factories to curb tax evasion. Right? Soon we'll be having, those scams zooming all over your factory. And this is in an effort to try and tame tax cheating in the country. Resident spies will be able to provide real-time surveillance on activities. Staff will complement other monitoring measures such as CCTV's camera. We'll be discussing about this, body cams, and also drones hovering over your premises from KRA. Still, they are on it. You need to read about this in the Standard today, a business segment. And there is another development on the Senate and the National Assembly supremacy battle regarding the control or an advisory that they wanted the Supreme Court to revise, and the Supreme Court now has declined. We shall look at that as well. And now you have the carte blanche to, of course, withdraw or deposit monies, 1.5 million, without any qualms right now that bank will ask you, what is the source of that money, right? And what do you intend to do with that money? Parliament has made that particular regulation by CBK is deeming it to be unconstitutional. We'll circle back with more on that on the other side of a break.